Good evening, everyone. In this video, I hope to be answering all 4 of the discussion questions for this week, talking about the SMART goals and what is college level writing. So starting off with the first discussion question is basically talking about what are my strengths in the writing process and how does that fit in with choices of successful students that we talked about in another one of the requirements this week. So I tend to be strongest when it comes to polishing and perfecting my work, and I really enjoy that aspect of the writing. I find it a little bit daunting with the drafting process, and sometimes the analysis can be overwhelming, but it's just really nice when you have everything written out and you're essentially making smaller adjustments and changes and you're trying to polish and perfect. I find that part really enjoyable. I like beautifying and adding words that are pretty. I can get a little too wordy sometimes though, but I really enjoy that. And a way that I see this fitting in with the choices of successful people, it was under or successful students. It was under the third one, and it was basically talking about setting meaningful goals, or basically being driven and being able to motivate yourself, learning to motivate yourself. Yeah, that was what it was about. And essentially the way that I see this fitting in with that is I'm able to motivate myself to get an essay completely written, so that way I can finish writing it and beautifying it towards the end. And so it's really motivating for me to know that I get to beautify it and make it sound the way I want it to and replace all the words once I finish writing it. So it makes drafting the paper easier. So on a small scale, this is something that has really helped motivate me to get my essays done throughout high school and now my college classes. So that's just been really, really cool, and I've really enjoyed that. Going into this second discussion question, essentially talking about an academic goal that I'm planning to really seek to achieve this year and how that fits in with the SMART acronym. So throughout this year, I have the goal of turning in all my assignments on time and doing well in them, which would essentially be getting a good grade and basically meeting the requirements that were set forth with the assignment. So the way that I see this being specific is essentially I specifically want to turn in every assignment on time. Now granted, there may be a couple assignments that I miss, but the goal is to turn them all in on time, and as well as to meet the criterion. And that is specific because each professor gives you a specific list of criterion, and I have the capability to email if the criterion are not as specific as I need them to be for my work. So that is specific. And then measurable. How do I measure whether or not I've done this? Well, I'm going to be measuring it by the percentage of the grade. So seeing the overall grade of the class shows you how well you met the criteria. So getting a good grade would say that I specifically addressed the criteria that the professor wanted me to address. And then also getting them in on time. I can look and see the exact time I submit it. So that's specific. Now, this is a pretty big goal, I would say. So there are a lot of smaller goals that are within this. For example, a goal I have is I want to write down all of my class workload throughout the week. I have it color-coded in my planner, and that is a goal that I have, to sit down every week and to write that out. And for every week, I want to complete my coursework in a timely manner and turn it in on time every week. So this is a weekly goal, but it's also a semester-long goal. So I would say it's pretty specific, pretty measurable. Talking about whether or not this is achievable. I do believe this is achievable because college classes they want the student to succeed, and I'm seeking to achieve what my professor has laid out before me. I believe that the course is pretty specific about what should and shouldn't be included in essays and how that should be written and all of that. So I do believe this to be achievable. And then realistic. Is this realistic? I do believe that it's realistic to expect to turn in these assignments on time and to generally get a good grade. I'm not holding myself to perfection. I'll probably get a grade that's below 100 a couple of times. But what I am saying is that the goal is to meet the criterion in such a way that I am able to get a good grade. And so I do believe that this is achievable through that it is realistic based off of the effort that you're able to put in. And then how is this time bound? Well, each week is its own time frame, and because of that, it's very motivational for me to say, okay, I have to have this in by this day, and I need to do this by this date. And so it is time bound, because there comes a point when you can no longer submit an assignment on time. It'll be late. So that's a pretty simple but realistic goal that I have for this academic year. And so I'm really, really excited about that. Next, question 3 talks about unattained goals and how that's promoted me to learn more about how I can set more realistic goals and how I can attain them. So a while back, I decided I wanted to start going to the gym. Unfortunately, I didn't really have a plan, and when I went into the gym, I started with weights that were too heavy for me. I wanted to increase too quickly, and I ended up getting burnt out and hurting myself. And so I left. I canceled my gym membership, and I was done. Now, that was a goal, but it was a pretty dismal one, and I failed. But essentially what I learned from that is when you start going to the gym and when you start disciplining yourself, if you've never done it before, you need to start small. And it is important that after you start small and you begin to grow, that you recognize that progress that you're making and you continue to be consistent. In the beginnings of starting a new discipline, it's less about making a ton of progress immediately and less about having a really great quality of your work and more about consistency and being able to do that every day and having a habitual goal that you're meeting. So right now, I recently decided about 2 weeks ago I wanted to start going to the gym again. And this time I'm going with my dad to his gym because his gym has a motivation, like a trainer there. And there's people that I know there that are really kind. And so I know that there's people there who are going to hold me to this. So I have accountability in place. And I have decided my goal is to show up 3 times a week, And so the goal isn't to hit a really high bench press, and the goal isn't to lift a ton of weight. The goal is to simply show up and to do my best. And if one of those days I have to lift just the bar and not have any weight on it, that's okay. And so I think that was really helpful for me, failing the first time. So that way the second time I now see that, okay, this is how you're supposed to set a realistic, achievable goal that's measurable and that's time bound. So I can measure, I can look back and say, wow, I went to the gym 3 times this week. And that was a specific time bound and measurable goal that I just achieved. And it's achievable because showing up is something I can do, even if I'm weaker or I got hurt and I can't work a specific muscle that I wanted to work. That's okay because I still achieved what I set for it to achieve. So essentially I see that that's been an area that's been really assisted in my experience from the failures of past goals that I did not achieve. And then finally, the last question is basically talking about how I've seen my writing improve across from maybe early starting writing and all the way up until now taking college classes, and what's the difference with a college class as opposed to, say, me writing when I was 7. So when I was 7, I actually wrote a book, and the plot was pretty interesting. It was about an Egyptian princess, and it was interesting, but the thing was my sentence structure was very poor and my vocabulary was not that great. My handwriting was also very, very rough. And so it was pretty rough. It was a start, but it wasn't great. And then when I got into middle school, I was required to start outlining and writing papers. And to me, those papers seemed huge. They were 3 paragraphs long, and it was really hard for me. It took me 3 to 4 days to write a paper, and that was really difficult. But I was able to do that consistently for about 3 years, where I would be writing like one paper maybe every 3 weeks, and I would think about it and plan it, and then I would outline it the next week, and then the next week I would write it. And so it was pretty, inconsistent. It was consistent, but it wasn't as frequent as maybe writing in college is. But it was, I was still learning to write. And then as I went through high school, I was required to write maybe a paper or 2 for every week or every 2 weeks. And so that got me used to writing at a higher level. And also over that period, I saw my sentence structure change. So through those years in middle school, my vocabulary was really increased. And I'm homeschooled, and so my mom and the teachers that coached me with some of the vocabulary stuff really drilled me on really good vocabulary. And so that was something they really poured into me. And then when I finally got into my high school years, that's when I really started to hone in on the grammar and the sentence structure. And yes, there was some of that in the earlier years as well, but I really started to focus in more on, okay, what is a verb and what is an adjective and what role does it play in the sentence and why is that important and where should they go and why should this one not go here and where does the comma go? And so there was a lot more of that happened there. And then finally, about 2 years ago, I started my first or a year ago, I started my first college class. And so for that class, I would have to write several really big papers throughout the semester. And they were pretty hard. It was the first time that I'd written like a 3,500 word paper for a professor to grade. And that was pretty daunting at first. But I saw through that process of being graded and being corrected and being provided with feedback that I was able to learn and grow through that. Because the difference was in that course, I realized that it was no longer writing objectively and saying, okay, this grammar is okay and the sentence structure is okay. That's to be expected in college. So if you're doing that, you're kind of doing the bare minimum. Like you need to have good sentence structure. You need to have good vocabulary. But then on top of that, you now have this new criterion of you're expected to write in accordance with the audience you're writing to. So if you know who you're writing to and what they're expecting from you, you need to write to appeal to that. If you know you're writing for a professor, you shouldn't necessarily be writing for a friend. You shouldn't write in a style that is appealing to someone that you know isn't going to be getting your paper. So essentially you need to write to the audience that you're given. And college is a really great time to practice that because the professors have a lot more freedom. And so they actually have the ability to say, okay, this is what I want in your paper. The book says this, but actually I prefer this. And sometimes they don't tell you that. Sometimes you have to learn. Sometimes you have to reach out and ask. And that's okay. That's another great life skill to learn. Learning to work hard, to learn what you need to do, to work hard, and to succeed well. And so being willing to reach out and put an extra effort into a relationship so you can learn more about what is required of you in this specific area, this specific season of your life. So that's a really unique aspect of college level writing that I think is really interesting and something I'm really excited to hone and improve on. And I really hope that was interesting. I hope that was helpful. Sorry, the video was a little bit long. I really wanted to think through and answer these questions because there were quite a few of them. But yeah, thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it.